Matthew Mitchell's diplomatic career took an unexpected turn the moment Yaxa's eyes widened in shock. "Human? That thing between your legs is huge!" the Suliban scientist exclaimed, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with a mix of fascination and alarm. The 28-year-old human diplomat froze, acutely aware of the holographic projection of his anatomy hovering between them. What should have been a routine medical examination had just become an interstellar incident. Matthew had arrived on the Suliban homeworld mere hours ago as part of a cultural exchange program. The diminutive humanoid species, known for their advanced genetic engineering capabilities, had welcomed him with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Now, in the sterile confines of the medical bay, that curiosity had transformed into outright astonishment. Yaxa, the young Suliban scientist assigned as Matthew's liaison, had activated the holographic display with the innocent intention of gathering data on human biology. Neither of them had anticipated the profound impact this revelation would have on Suliban society. As Matthew struggled to maintain his diplomatic composure, Suliban medical staff crowded around the hologram, their skin flickering with patterns of amazement and concern. The news spread through the facility like wildfire, each whisper and exclamation adding to the growing tension. Within minutes, the Suliban scientific community was abuzz with speculation. Geneticists debated the evolutionary implications, while sociologists pondered the cultural ramifications. The Suliban government, caught off guard by this unexpected development, convened an emergency session to discuss the potential fallout. Back on Earth, the diplomatic corps received word of the incident. Urgent messages flew between offices as officials debated whether to recall Matthew or leverage this sudden interest in humanity to their advantage in negotiations. Matthew found himself at the center of a storm he never could have anticipated. His temporary quarters in the Suliban capital city became both a sanctuary and a prison as he grappled with his newfound notoriety. Outside, crowds of curious Suliban gathered, their skin pulsing with patterns that reflected their intense interest in the human visitor. Yaxa, torn between scientific fascination and guilt over the incident she had inadvertently caused, worked tirelessly to bridge the growing divide. She recognized the potential for this anatomical difference to spark a broader discussion about genetic diversity and evolution among her people. Some Suliban viewed humans as a potential source of genetic material to enhance their own species. Others feared the implications of such significant biological differences. The delicate balance of interspecies relations teetered on the edge of a precipice. As tensions rose, Matthew realized that his actions in the coming days would shape the future of human Suliban relations. He would need to navigate the complex interplay of cultural misunderstandings, scientific curiosity, and diplomatic responsibility with utmost care. The incident had opened a Pandora's box of questions about biology, culture, and the nature of sentience itself. Matthew and Yaxa found themselves drawn together by circumstance, their growing connection a testament to the potential for understanding between their two races. With the eyes of two worlds upon them, Matthew and Yaxa embarked on a journey to prevent an interspecies incident and forge a deeper connection between humans and Suliban. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but it also held the promise of unprecedented cooperation and mutual growth. As the Suliban sun set on that fateful first day, Matthew steeled himself for the trials to come. He knew that his next steps would determine not just his own fate, but potentially the course of human-alien relations for generations to come. As the Suliban sun dipped below the horizon, Matthew found himself summoned to an emergency meeting with the Suliban government. The sterile corridors of the diplomatic complex echoed with his footsteps as he made his way to the council chambers, his mind racing with the implications of the day's events. Chancellor Zork, a wizened Suliban with intricate bioluminescent patterns crisscrossing his face, sat at the head of a long table, his piercing gaze fixed on Matthew as he entered the room. The air crackled with tension as Matthew took his seat, acutely aware of the scrutiny of the assembled Suliban officials. "Mr. Mitchell," Chancellor Zork began, his voice a low rumble, "we find ourselves in an unexpected situation. Your anatomy has caused quite a stir among our people. We must address the potential impact on our relations." Matthew opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, Yaksa burst into the room. Her skin pulsed with patterns of perseverance and urgency. "Chancellor, esteemed council members," she said, her voice steady despite her obvious agitation. "I take full responsibility for this incident, but I implore you to see the scientific value in continuing our cultural exchange program." As Yaksa passionately defended the program, Matthew observed the reactions of the council members. Some leaned forward, intrigued by her arguments, while others recoiled, their skin flickering with patterns of skepticism and concern. Chancellor Zork raised a hand, silencing the murmurs that had begun to fill the room. "Your passion is noted, Scientist Yaksa. Perhaps there is a way to turn this incident to our mutual benefit." The Chancellor's proposal to expand the exchange program to include human scientists collaborating on genetic studies sent a ripple of excitement through the chamber. Matthew watched as Suliban scientists in attendance began to whisper among themselves, their skin pulsing with rapid patterns of possibilities and questions. As the discussion heated up, Matthew's communication device buzzed. He discreetly checked the message from Earth's diplomatic corps, his brow furrowing as he read their cautious instructions. The weight of two worlds' expectations settled heavily on his shoulders. In the days that followed, Matthew found himself spending more time with Yaksa as they worked to salvage the exchange program. She guided him through the winding streets of the Suliban capital, her skin glowing with excitement as she explained the intricacies of their technology and culture. As they stood atop a viewing platform, overlooking the city's bioluminescent skyline, Matthew noticed a subtle change in Yaksa's demeanor. Her patterns seemed to pulse in sync with his heartbeat, and she stood closer to him than protocol dictated. He felt a flutter in his chest, a mixture of excitement and apprehension at the implications of their growing connection. Their moment of peace was shattered by the sound of angry voices. From their vantage point, they could see a group of protesters gathering outside the diplomatic compound. Leading the crowd was Draz, a firebrand Suliban politician known for his conservative views. "Expel the human," Draz's voice carried over the crowd. "Protect our genetic purity." Yaksa's skin dimmed with concern. "This is not good, Matthew. Draz has a significant following on our social media platforms. His words carry weight." As they made their way back to the compound, Matthew's mind raced with potential solutions. The success of the program, and possibly the future of human-Suliban relations, now rested on his ability to navigate this complex situation. Upon returning to his quarters, Matthew found a message waiting for him. Dr. Krell, a renowned Suliban geneticist, requested a private meeting. Intrigued and wary, Matthew agreed to the rendezvous. In a secluded laboratory, Dr. Krell's eyes gleamed with scientific fervor as he presented his proposal. "Your genetic material could revolutionize our biotechnology, Mr. Mitchell. Think of the advancements we could make together." Matthew listened, his stomach churning as he considered the ethical implications. The offer was tempting from a diplomatic standpoint, but the potential for abuse was clear. As he opened his mouth to respond, a commotion in the hallway caught his attention. Peering through a crack in the door, Matthew overheard a hushed conversation between two Suliban officials. His blood ran cold as he realized they were discussing a covert operation to obtain human genetic samples without consent. "Minister Vex wants results," one official hissed. "If the human won't cooperate, we'll take what we need." Matthew's mind raced. He now faced a multifaceted threat: the growing protests, Dr. Krell's ethically questionable proposal, and a potential covert operation that could spark an interstellar incident if discovered. As he prepared for his crucial meeting with Chancellor Zork, Matthew knew he had to find a way to address the Suliban's scientific interests while protecting human rights and dignity. The fate of two species hung in the balance, and time was running out. Matthew straightened his uniform and took a deep breath. The weight of his responsibility pressed down on him as he stepped out of his quarters, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in the intricate dance of interstellar diplomacy. Matthew's meeting with Chancellor Zork stretched late into the night, the tension in the room palpable as they negotiated the delicate balance between scientific curiosity and ethical concerns. By the time he emerged from the council chambers, His head throbbed with the weight of the decisions made. The expanded exchange program had been approved, but at what cost? As he walked back to his quarters, the corridors seemed to close in around him. The excitement buzzing through the Sulaban scientific community was almost tangible, their skin pulsing with vibrant patterns of anticipation. Matthew couldn't shake the feeling that he had opened Pandora's box. The next morning, he found himself in Dr. Krill's lab, surrounded by eager Sulaban researchers. Their eyes gleamed with an intensity that made Matthew's skin crawl. "Just a small sample, Mr. Mitchell," Dr. Krill said, his voice silky smooth as he approached with a device that looked unsettlingly like a hypodermic needle. "This will be painless, I assure you." Matthew hesitated, but the weight of diplomatic responsibility pressed down on him. He extended his arm, wincing slightly as the device extracted a sample of his DNA. As the days passed, the requests for more samples grew increasingly frequent and invasive. Matthew found himself spending more time in the lab than in diplomatic meetings, his body becoming a subject of fascination for the Sulaban scientists. It was during one of these sessions that Yaksa intervened. She burst into the lab, her skin flashing patterns of anger and concern. "Enough!" she exclaimed, positioning herself between Matthew and Dr. Creel. "He's not a lab rat for you to experiment on." Dr. Krell's eyes narrowed, his own skin pulsing with irritation. "Your personal feelings are clouding your scientific judgment, Yaksa. Step aside." But Yaksa stood her ground, and Matthew felt a surge of gratitude. As they left the lab together, he noticed the way her patterns seemed to synchronize with his heartbeat, a visual representation of their growing connection. Their momentary peace was shattered by the sound of angry voices outside the research facility. A crowd had gathered, their skin flickering with patterns of rage and fear. At the forefront stood Draz, his voice carrying over the din. "The human corrupts our society, and now one of our own betrays us," Draz pointed accusingly at Yaksa. "Expel them both." Matthew and Yaksa retreated inside, the doors sealing shut behind them. The facility had become both sanctuary and prison. "I'm sorry," Yaksa said, her patterns dimming with sadness. "I never meant for this to happen." Matthew reached out, his hand hovering near hers. "You have nothing to apologize for. You're the only one here who's treated me like a person, not a science project." Their moment was interrupted by a loud bang from a nearby lab. They rushed to investigate, finding a scene of chaos. Smoke billowed from a malfunctioning piece of equipment, and a frantic researcher was calling for medical assistance. "Mr. Mitchell, we need your help," the researcher cried. "We need a human tissue sample to calibrate the system." Matthew hesitated, suspicion gnawing at him. This was the third emergency this week that had required his immediate biological input. As he turned to discuss the situation with Yaksa, he noticed a figure lurking in the shadows of the lab. Minister Vex's face was illuminated briefly by the flickering lights, a look of frustration crossing his features before he slipped away. That night, Matthew confided his suspicions to Yaksa. They huddled together in a quiet corner of the facility, voices low. "I think Minister Vex is behind these accidents," Matthew whispered. "He's trying to get more than just basic DNA samples." Yaksa's patterns pulsed with concern. "We need proof. If we can expose this plot, maybe we can put an end to this madness." They began their investigation, carefully probing the recent incidents and gathering data. But as they accessed a restricted terminal in one of the labs, alarms suddenly blared to life. Blast doors slammed shut around them, sealing them in a small section of the facility. "What's happening?" Matthew shouted over the noise. Yaksa's fingers flew over the control panel, her patterns flashing with increasing distress. "It's a security lockdown. We've triggered some kind of hidden protocol." As the alarms faded, leaving them in eerie silence, the reality of their situation sank in. They were trapped, cut off from the outside world, with no idea who might be coming to their rescue or to silence them. Matthew looked at Yaksa, seeing his own mix of fear and drive reflected in her bioluminescent patterns. Whatever came next, they would face it together. As they began to explore their high-tech prison, searching for a way out, neither of them realized that their disappearance was about to spark a crisis that would push human-Sulaban relations to the brink of collapse. Matthew and Yaksa exchanged a determined look as they surveyed the sealed lab section. Their minds raced, processing the gravity of their situation and the urgent need to expose Minister Vex's conspiracy. "There," Yaksa whispered, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with excitement. She pointed to a small ventilation shaft near the ceiling. "If we can reach that, we might be able to bypass the security lockdown." Matthew nodded, already moving towards a nearby lab bench. With a grunt, he pushed it beneath the vent, creating a makeshift ladder. As Yaksa climbed up, her nimble fingers worked at the grate covering the shaft. Within moments, it clattered to the floor. "Ladies first," Matthew said with a wry smile, helping Yaksa into the narrow opening before following close behind. The tight space echoed with their labored breathing as they crawled through the maze-like ductwork. After what felt like hours, a faint light ahead signaled their salvation. With a final push, they tumbled out into a dimly lit corridor, alarms blaring in the distance. As they regained their bearings, the full impact of their absence became apparent. The Suliban capital was in chaos. Through the windows, they could see crowds gathering in the streets, their skin flickering with patterns of confusion and fear. "We need to get to Chancellor Zork," Matthew said, his voice urgent. "It's the only way to stop this before it gets worse." They moved swiftly through the building, avoiding patrols and using Yaksa's knowledge of the facility's layout to their advantage. As they approached the Chancellor's office, they could hear raised voices from within. Without hesitation, Matthew pushed open the door. Chancellor Zork looked up, his eyes widening in surprise. "Mr. Mitchell, Scientist Yaksa, we thought you were—" "Chancellor," Matthew interrupted, "we have evidence of a conspiracy. Minister Vex is planning to create genetically enhanced Suliban soldiers using human DNA." The room fell silent as Matthew and Yaksa presented their findings. Chancellor Zork's expression grew increasingly grave as he examined the data. "This is troubling," he said finally, his skin pulsing with patterns of concern and anger. "If this is true, it could destabilize our entire society." "It is true, Chancellor," Yaksa insisted. "We've seen the labs, the secret protocols. Minister Vex has gone too far." Chancellor Zork's decision was swift. "Guards, arrest Minister Vex and his associates immediately." But as the guards rushed to carry out the order, an aide burst into the room. "Chancellor, Minister Vex is gone. He and a group of loyalists have fled the capital." The news sent ripples of shock through the room. Chancellor Zork turned to Matthew and Yaksa, his expression stern. "We must address the public immediately. The truth must be known." As they made their way to the central broadcast station, the streets below were a sea of agitated Suliban. News of Matthew and Yaksa's reappearance had spread quickly, fueling wild speculation. Chancellor Zork's address was direct and unflinching. He revealed Minister Vex's plot, praised Matthew and Yaksa's bravery, and called for calm. As his words echoed across the capital, the mood of the crowd began to shift. Matthew watched in amazement as Suliban, who had once called for his expulsion, now cheered his name. The sudden change was dizzying, and he felt Yaksa's hand slip into his, anchoring him. Their moment of relief was short-lived. An explosion rocked the building, and alarms began to blare. Security personnel rushed in, shouting urgently. "Chancellor, the main communications center has been seized. It's Draz. He's staging a coup." On the screens around them, Draz's face appeared, his skin pulsing with patterns of righteous anger. "Citizens of Suliban, do not be fooled by these lies. The humans seek to corrupt our genetic purity. We must expel all off-worlders before it's too late." Chancellor Zork turned to his military advisors, his voice tight with tension. "We must retake the communications center immediately. If Draz maintains control, he could incite planet-wide riots." Before anyone else could speak, Matthew stepped forward. "Let me lead the team to retake the center." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the human diplomat. Chancellor Zork studied him carefully. "Mr. Mitchell, this is not your fight. The danger—" "With all due respect, Chancellor," Matthew interrupted, "this became my fight the moment I set foot on your world. I have combat training from my time in Earth Space Force. I can help." The Suliban military commander, his skin flickering with patterns of curiosity and respect, nodded slowly. The human's skills could be valuable. We'll pair him with our special forces unit. As preparations began, Yaksa approached Matthew, her patterns pulsing with persistence. "I'm coming with you," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "My knowledge of our tech could be crucial." Matthew started to protest, but the look in Yaksa's eyes stopped him. He turned to the military commander, who was already shaking his head. "Commander," Matthew said, "Yaksa's expertise could mean the difference between success and failure. We need her." After a moment of tense consideration, the commander relented. "Very well, but you both follow our lead, understood?" As they geared up for the assault, Matthew caught Yaksa's eye. In that moment, unspoken words passed between them, a promise to watch each other's backs, to see this through together. The team moved out, slipping through the chaotic streets towards the communication center. As they approached the imposing structure, Matthew's heart raced with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Whatever happened next would shape the future of human-Suliban relations for years to come. With a nod from the commander, they began their assault, rushing towards the building's entrance. The sound of weapons fire filled the air, and Matthew's world narrowed to the immediate present. The weight of the unfamiliar Suliban weapon in his hands, the pulsing patterns of his teammates' skin, and the unwavering presence of Yaksa at his side. As they fought their way deeper into the facility, Matthew realized that this was more than just a mission. It was a turning point, not only for two species, but for him and Yaksa as well. With each step, each shared glance, each moment of teamwork, their bond grew stronger. They pressed on, the fate of two worlds hanging in the balance. Balance. The final push into the communications center was a blur of flashing lights, pulsing Suliban skin patterns, and the acrid smell of weapons fire. Matthew and Yaksa moved in perfect sync, covering each other as they advanced through the building's corridors. With a final burst of effort, they breached the main control room. Draz stood at the central console, his skin flickering with rage and desperation. He turned, raising a weapon, but Matthew was faster. A well-aimed shot from his Suliban weapon sent Draz crumpling to the floor, unconscious. "It's over," Matthew said, breathing heavily as he surveyed the room. Yaksa worked quickly to shut down Draz's broadcast and restore control to the legitimate government. As the dust settled and Draz was taken into custody, Matthew found himself thrust into the spotlight. The Suliban media hailed him and Yaksa as heroes, their images broadcast across the planet. The sudden shift from suspicion to adulation was dizzying. In the days that followed, Matthew barely had time to process the events. He and Yaksa were constantly in meetings, debriefings, and interviews. The air buzzed with excitement and possibility as the Suliban people began to see humans in a new light. Then came the announcement that would change everything. Chancellor Zork called for a planet-wide assembly to address the future of human-Suliban relations. Matthew and Yaksa were to be honored guests. As they entered the Grand Hall of Unity, Matthew felt a mix of awe and trepidation. The massive structure was filled to capacity, with representatives from every Suliban province in attendance. The hall hummed with anticipation, skin patterns flickering like a living light show. Chancellor Zork opened the assembly with a powerful speech. "Friends, we stand at a crossroads," he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Recent events have shown us the potential of cooperation between our species. Matthew Mitchell and scientist Yaksa have demonstrated what we can achieve together." Matthew felt Yaksa's hand brush against his, a subtle gesture of support. He glanced at her, seeing his own mix of emotions reflected in her bioluminescent patterns. The assembly proceeded with a series of presentations and debates. Dr. Krell took the stage, presenting his findings on human DNA. His enthusiasm was palpable as he spoke of potential medical breakthroughs and genetic advancements. "The human genome offers us possibilities we've only dreamed of," Dr. Krell explained, gesturing to complex holographic displays. "With careful study and ethical application, we could revolutionize our understanding of genetics." The hall erupted into heated discussions. Some Suliban representatives leaned forward, eyes wide with excitement. Others shook their heads, their skin pulsing with patterns of concern. "We cannot rush into this," one representative argued. The ethical implications are staggering. We must proceed with caution. As the debate intensified, Matthew noticed a disturbance near the back of the hall. A group of Suliban moved with purpose, their skin patterns unusually muted. Before he could react, the air shimmered with a fine metallic mist. "Nanobots!" Yaksa gasped, recognizing the threat instantly. Chaos erupted as the microscopic machines spread through the air. Chancellor Zork stumbled, clutching his throat. Other Suliban began to show signs of distress, their skin patterns flickering erratically. Matthew sprang into action, his diplomatic training kicking in. "Evacuate the hall!" he shouted, helping Chancellor Zork to his feet. "Yaksa, can you access the environmental controls?" She nodded, already moving towards a control panel. "I'll try to filter them out, but it'll take time." As Suliban security forces rushed to escort representatives out of the hall, Matthew coordinated with the medical team. "The nanobots are targeting Suliban physiology," he explained rapidly. "We need to boost your immune responses. Do you have any broad-spectrum antivirals?" The lead medic nodded, quickly administering a treatment to the affected Suliban. Matthew felt a surge of relief as Chancellor Zork's breathing eased. Yaksa worked feverishly at the environmental controls, her fingers flying over the alien interface. "Almost got it," she muttered, her skin pulsing with intense concentration. With a final command, the hall's ventilation system hummed to life. The metallic sheen in the air began to dissipate as powerful filters activated, trapping the harmful nanobots. As the immediate danger passed, Matthew and Yaksa found themselves at the center of a flurry of activity. They worked tirelessly, assisting the injured and helping to restore order to the assembly hall. Hours later, as the last of the affected Suliban received treatment, Chancellor Zork approached them. His skin pulsed with a mix of gratitude and perseverance. "Once again you have proven the value of our cooperation," he said, his voice carrying the weight of his position. "This attack was meant to drive us apart, but it has only brought us closer together." Matthew nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. "Chancellor, I believe this is an opportunity. We've shown what we can accomplish when we work together." Chancellor Zork's skin flickered with agreement. "Indeed, I intend to propose a formal alliance between Earth and our world. It's time we embrace the possibilities of our shared future." As word of the failed attack and Matthew's actions spread, the mood in the assembly shifted. Suliban representatives who had been hesitant now looked at Matthew with newfound respect. The hall buzzed with excited discussions of potential cooperation and exchange programs. Amidst the chaos and planning, Matthew felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find Ambassador Elena Rodriguez, newly arrived from Earth with a delegation of diplomats and scientists. "Quite an introduction to Suliban politics, Mr. Mitchell," she said, her expression a mix of approval and concern. "We have a lot to discuss." Matthew nodded, suddenly aware of the complex web of relationships and responsibilities he now found himself in. As he glanced at Yaksa, busy with her own group of Suliban scientists, he realized that their personal relationship would be under intense scrutiny in the days to come. The assembly hall continued to buzz with activity, the failed attack having galvanized support for stronger human-Suliban cooperation. As Matthew prepared to dive into negotiations, he knew that the real challenges were just beginning. The future of two worlds hung in the balance, and he was standing at the center of it all. As the excitement of the assembly's aftermath began to fade, Matthew found himself thrust into a new whirlwind of diplomatic meetings and negotiations. The failed nanobot attack had galvanized support for human-Suliban cooperation, but it had also opened a Pandora's box of complex issues that needed to be addressed. In a private meeting room adjacent to the assembly hall, Matthew sat across from Ambassador Elena Rodriguez, her expression grave as she outlined the latest developments from Earth. "The situation is delicate, Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice low and measured. "While there's unprecedented support for closer ties with the Suliban, there are also serious concerns about the direction of our scientific cooperation." Matthew leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "What kind of concerns?" Ambassador Rodriguez pulled out a data pad, bringing up a series of documents. Dr. Marcus Blackwood's proposed research into hybrid beings has raised significant ethical red flags. The potential for misuse is staggering. As Matthew scanned the documents, he felt a growing sense of unease. The proposed experiments pushed the boundaries of what many considered ethically acceptable, even in the name of scientific progress. Chancellor Zork has expressed interest in the potential advancements, Matthew said, carefully choosing his words. But I can see why this would be controversial. Ambassador Rodriguez nodded, her expression grim. It's more than controversial, Matthew. It's a political powder keg. We need you to take a step back from your personal involvement with the Suliban. Maintain diplomatic neutrality. Is that clear? Matthew felt as if he'd been doused with cold water. He thought of Yaksa, of the bond they'd formed. Ambassador, with all due respect. This isn't a request, Mr. Mitchell. Rodriguez cut him off, her tone brooking no argument. The future of human-Suliban relations hangs in the balance. We can't afford any appearance of bias. As Matthew left the meeting, his palms sweating, he caught sight of Yaksa across the hall. She was surrounded by a group of Suliban scientists, their skin patterns pulsing with agitation. As he watched, one of them jabbed an accusatory finger in Yaksa's direction, his patterns flashing with hostility. Matthew started to move towards her, but Ambassador Rodriguez's warning echoed in his mind. Reluctantly, he turned away, feeling as if he were betraying a vital part of himself. Over the next few days, Matthew threw himself into the negotiations, trying to ignore the growing ache in his chest each time he saw Yaksa from afar. The talks were intense, with both sides pushing for their interests while trying to maintain the fragile new alliance. It was during one of these marathon sessions that the news broke. A visibly shaken Suliban aide burst into the conference room, his skin flickering with patterns of alarm and disbelief. "Chancellor Zork," he gasped, "we've just received word. There's been a breach. Human DNA samples? They've been stolen." The room erupted into chaos. Chancellor Zork's patterns pulsed with shock and anger as he demanded more information. Matthew locked eyes with Ambassador Rodriguez, seeing his own concern mirrored in her expression. As details emerged, the situation grew increasingly dire. A group of radical Suliban geneticists, led by a previously unknown scientist named Dr. Vexus, had obtained samples of human DNA, including Matthew's, and begun unauthorized experiments to create human Suliban hybrids. The public reaction was swift and volatile. Protests erupted across Suliban cities, with conservatives decrying the experiments as an attack on their genetic purity. Human rights groups on Earth called for an immediate suspension of all scientific cooperation with the Suliban. In a desperate bid to contain the crisis, Chancellor Zork called an emergency press conference. Matthew stood to the side of the stage, watching as the Suliban leader addressed the assembled media. "I assure you, we are taking this breach with the utmost seriousness," Zork declared, his patterns pulsing with drive. "I have personally appointed scientist Yaksa to lead the investigation into these illegal experiments." Matthew's heart skipped a beat at the mention of Yaksa's name. He scanned the crowd until he spotted her, her expression a mask of professional calm despite the storm of patterns flickering across her skin. As the press conference concluded, Matthew found himself pulled aside by Ambassador Rodriguez. "This changes everything," she said, her voice tight with stress. "We need to reassess our entire approach to the negotiations." Matthew nodded, his mind racing. "What about the investigation? Shouldn't we be offering our support to Yaksa and her team?" Rodriguez shook her head firmly. "Absolutely not. This is a Suliban internal matter. We can't be seen as interfering." She fixed Matthew with a hard stare. "And I hope I don't need to remind you to keep your distance from scientist Yaksa. Any hint of impropriety could derail everything we've worked for." As the ambassador walked away, Matthew felt a fierce conflict raging within him. Every instinct screamed at him to find Yaksa, to offer his help and support, but he knew the stakes were too high to risk a diplomatic incident. With a heavy heart, Matthew returned to his quarters, feeling more isolated than he had since first arriving on the Suliban homeworld. He paced the room, his mind churning with unanswered questions and suppressed emotions. Finally, unable to bear the inaction any longer, Matthew made a decision. He might not be able to assist Yaksa's official investigation, but that didn't mean he had to sit idly by. There were other ways to gather information, other channels he could exploit. Pulling out a secure communication device, Matthew began reaching out to his network of Suliban contacts. If there was a black market for human DNA, someone would know about it. And Matthew was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the personal cost. As he worked late into the night, combing through leads and cryptic messages, Matthew couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the verge of uncovering something far larger and more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, and the clock was ticking. Matthew's late-night investigation was interrupted by an urgent communiqué. An emergency summit between human and Suliban leaders had been convened on a neutral space station orbiting the Suliban homeworld. His presence was required immediately. Hours later, Matthew found himself aboard a sleek shuttle racing towards the space station. The vessel's viewports offered a stunning vista of the Suliban planet below, its swirling atmosphere a tapestry of blues and greens. But Matthew had no time to appreciate the view. His mind raced, reviewing the information he'd gathered and preparing for the crucial meeting ahead. As the shuttle docked, Matthew was greeted by a harried-looking Ambassador Rodriguez. "We're cutting it close," she said, ushering him through the station's sterile corridors. "The summit's about to begin, and tensions are high." They entered the main conference room, a vast chamber dominated by a circular table. Human and Suliban delegates sat on opposite sides, the space between them charged with unease. Matthew's eyes instinctively sought out Yaksa, finding her seated among a group of Suliban scientists. Their gazes met briefly, a flicker of shared concern passing between them. Chancellor Zork called the meeting to order, his skin patterns pulsing with a mix of authority and apprehension. "We are gathered here to address the crisis that threatens the very foundation of our alliance," he began. "I call upon scientists Yaksa and Mr. Mitchell to present their findings on the hybrid situation." Matthew stepped forward, aware of the weight of every eye in the room. He had just opened his mouth to speak when a commotion erupted near the human delegation. Dr. Marcus Blackwood, the controversial figure behind the hybrid research proposal, stood abruptly. "Honored delegates," he announced, his voice ringing with impossibly strong excitement, "I have a breakthrough to share." A murmur rippled through the assembly as Blackwood continued. "My team has developed a method to safely integrate Suliban genetic enhancements into human physiology without creating full hybrids." The room erupted into chaos. Suliban delegates flashed patterns of alarm and curiosity, while human representatives argued loudly amongst themselves. Chancellor Zork raised his hands, calling for order. "Dr. Blackwood," he said, his patterns flickering with interest and caution, "your claim is extraordinary, but we must consider the implications carefully. The potential for military applications." Ambassador Rodriguez interrupted, her diplomatic instincts sensing an opportunity. "Chancellor, if I may," she began, her voice calm but forceful, "I propose a joint human Suliban research initiative to explore Dr. Blackwood's findings under strict ethical guidelines." As debate raged around him, Matthew felt his secure communicator vibrate. He discreetly checked the message, his blood running cold as he read the urgent update from his Suliban contacts. Without hesitation, Matthew strode to the center of the room. "Delegates, I apologize for the interruption, but I have critical information that cannot wait." All eyes turned to him as he continued. "Dr. Vexus, the scientist behind the illegal hybrid experiments, has gone into hiding with several fully grown hybrids. Our intelligence suggests he plans to auction them off to the highest bidder." A shocked silence fell over the assembly, broken only by the sound of Chancellor Zork's skin patterns shifting rapidly. The Suliban leader's voice was grave as he spoke. "This threat requires immediate action. I propose a joint human Suliban task force to track down Dr. Vexus and secure the hybrids." Zork's gaze swept the room before settling on Matthew. "Mr. Mitchell, your experience and understanding of both our cultures make you the ideal candidate to lead the human contingent of this task force." He turned to Yaksa, who straightened in her seat. "Scientist Yaksa, I ask you to lead our Suliban team. Your expertise and role in uncovering this conspiracy are invaluable." Ambassador Rodriguez hesitated briefly before nodding her assent. "Agreed. Mr. Mitchell, you have authorization to assemble a team of human specialists." Dr. Blackwood stepped forward, his earlier excitement replaced by tenacity. I volunteer my services. My knowledge of hybrid genetics could be crucial to the mission's success. As Matthew and Yaksa began to formulate a strategy, an aide burst into the conference room, his skin patterns flashing urgent distress. Chancellor, we've received reports of hybrid sightings across multiple sectors of Suliban space. Several have escaped from Dr. Vexus's hidden facility. The news sent a fresh wave of panic through the assembly. Matthew locked eyes with Yaksa, both realizing the magnitude of the crisis they now faced. Their task had just become far more complex and dangerous. Chancellor Zork's voice cut through the commotion. The task force's mission must expand. Contain and capture these escaped hybrids before they cause further chaos or fall into enemy hands. As the summit dissolved into frantic planning sessions, Matthew and Yaksa found a quiet corner to confer. Despite the earlier pressure to distance themselves, they knew their combined expertise was now more crucial than ever. We'll need to use a combination of human tactical expertise and Suliban biotracking technology, Yaksa said, her skin patterns shifting with rapid calculations. Matthew nodded, already mapping out potential strategies in his mind. Agreed. We should set up containment zones across Suliban space using advanced sensor networks to detect the hybrid's unique genetic signatures. As they dove deeper into planning, Matthew couldn't shake a nagging feeling. The scale and complexity of this crisis seemed almost too perfect, as if orchestrated by an unseen hand. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the immediate challenges ahead. The task force began to assemble, a mix of human and Suliban specialists gathering in the station's main hangar. As Matthew watched them, he could sense the undercurrent of tension and mistrust. Building a cohesive team would be a challenge in itself. Yaksa appeared at his side, her patterns reflecting his own concern. We have our work cut out for us, she said quietly. Matthew nodded, his expression grim. Indeed, but failure is not an option. The fate of both our peoples hangs in the balance. As they prepared to board their ships and begin the hunt for Vexus and the escaped hybrids, neither Matthew nor Yaksa could have anticipated the shocking revelations and existential threats that lay ahead. The true test of their alliance and their relationship was only just beginning. As the task force's ships streaked through Suliban space, Matthew couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against an invisible clock. The escaped hybrids posed an immediate threat, but Dr. Vexus remained the true prize. After days of relentless pursuit, their efforts finally bore fruit. We've got a lock on Vexus's signal, Yaksa announced, her skin patterns pulsing with excitement. It's coming from an abandoned research station in the Thalassia Nebula. Matthew leaned over her console, studying the data. That's deep in uncharted territory. Perfect place for a hidden base. Within hours, their strike team assembled outside the dilapidated station. Matthew and Yaksa led from the front, their mixed human Suliban squad a testament to their newfound cooperation. Remember, Matthew addressed the team, our primary objective is to apprehend Vexus and secure his research. Be prepared for anything. They breached the airlock, immediately engulfed by stale, recycled air. As they moved through dimly lit corridors, the signs of recent activity became apparent. Discarded equipment, hastily erased data terminals, and the faint hum of active power systems. Yaksa's skin flickered with concern. These readings, he's still here. They rounded a corner and found themselves facing a sealed blast door. Beyond it, they could hear the frantic sounds of someone working. Vexus, Matthew called out. It's over. Surrender peacefully and we can work this out. A manic laugh echoed through the intercom. You fools! You have no idea what you're dealing with. This is bigger than all of us. Matthew nodded to the tech specialist, who began overriding the door's security. As the massive barrier slowly creaked open, they were met with a startling sight. Dr. Vexus stood before a massive computer array, his fingers flying across multiple interfaces. The walls were lined with stasis pods, each containing a sleeping hybrid. Step away from the console, Yaksa demanded, her biostunner raised. Vexus spun to face them, his eyes wild with a mixture of fear and triumph. Too late. The data is already uploading. Soon my benefactors will have everything they need to... Matthew lunged forward, tackling Vexus away from the consoles. They grappled on the floor, Matthew struggling to subdue the surprisingly strong scientist. "Yaxa," he shouted, "stop the upload." She rushed to the computer, her skin patterns shifting rapidly as she interfaced with the alien system. "I'm trying, but there's some kind of—" A piercing alarm cut through the air. Red warning lights bathed the room in an ominous glow. "What have you done?" Vexus screamed, finally subdued beneath Matthew's weight. A computerized voice echoed through the facility. "Failsafe activated. Releasing retrovirus Omega. All personnel evacuate immediately." Matthew's blood ran cold. "Everyone, out now!" But as the team turned to flee, the blast doors slammed shut with a resounding clang. They were trapped. Vents in the ceiling hissed open, releasing a fine mist into the air. Matthew's skin tingled as he breathed it in, a strange warmth spreading through his body. "The virus," Yaxa gasped, her luminescent patterns flickering erratically. "It's affecting us differently." Matthew stared at his hands, watching in awe as his skin seemed to ripple and toughen before his eyes. He felt stronger, more aware of his surroundings. Beside him, Yaxa's form shimmered, her already incredible biomanipulation abilities visibly amplifying. "What's happening to us?" one of the human soldiers asked, his voice filled with panic. Before anyone could respond, a new alarm blared. The stasis pods lining the walls began to open, their occupants stirring to life. Matthew and Yaxa moved to defensive positions, unsure if the awakening hybrids posed a threat, but as the first of them stepped forward, they were surprised to see not aggression, but curiosity in its eyes. "We mean you no harm," a tall, statuesque hybrid announced. Its features were a perfect blend of human and Suliban traits, with iridescent skin and eyes that spoke of deep intelligence. "I am Nexus," it continued. "We've been aware of your pursuit. We hoped you would find us." Matthew lowered his weapon slightly, confusion etched across his face. "You wanted to be found?" Nexus nodded. "We are not the monsters you fear. We represent a new possibility, a future where humans and Suliban can truly understand one another." Yaxa stepped forward, her patterns pulsing with curiosity. "You're not under Vexus's control?" "No," Nexus replied. "We've evolved beyond his original designs. We see the potential for a collaborative future, one that embraces the strengths of both species." As if to emphasize the point, Nexus approached a nearby console and began working with incredible speed. "The virus Vexus released. We can help neutralize it, but in return we ask for recognition, for the right to exist and contribute to this new era of cooperation." Matthew and Yaxa exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. Their shared ordeal, the strange enhancements they were experiencing, it all pointed to a future neither of them could have imagined. "All right," Matthew said, holstering his weapon. "Show us what you can do." As Nexus worked alongside Yaxa, their enhanced abilities combining in ways that defied conventional science, Matthew felt a surge of hope. The crisis that had brought them to this point was just getting started, but for the first time, he could see a path forward, one that united humans, Suliban, and these remarkable hybrids in ways no one could have predicted. The antidote began to take shape, a testament to what they could achieve together. And as Matthew watched Yaxa work, her luminescent skin glowing with newfound power and purpose, he realized that his feelings for her had deepened into something profound and unshakable. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew they would face them together, as partners, as pioneers, and perhaps as something more.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.